Sarah Chen woke to the soft hum of the environmental controls adjusting the cottage's climate for optimal morning comfort. The system knew her sleep patterns down to the minute, knew Marcus stirred earlier than she did, knew to have his coffee brewing at precisely 4:47 a.m. Through the smart glass windows, the lake reflected the pale pre-dawn sky, and somewhere in the distance, a loon called across the water, one of the few sounds their sound-dampening system allowed through, because Sarah had programmed it that way 5 years ago, back when the cottage was just a cottage and not a deliberate statement. Marcus's arm tightened around her waist, his breath warm against her shoulder blade. The gesture was proprietary and tender in equal measure, and Sarah felt the familiar pull low in her stomach, the one that had been there since their first date when he'd fumbled with fishing line and she'd kissed him to stop his nervous rambling. That was before Neuralink had blown up, before the $2.3 billion acquisition, before Marcus Way became the kind of name that made venture capitalists sit up straighter and his mother develop opinions about appropriate wives for tech billionaires. "You're awake," Marcus murmured against her skin, and his hand slid lower, tracing the curve of her hip through the thin fabric of her sleep shirt. "I have a boat departure at 6:30. Sarah's voice came out rougher than she intended. "Early survey of the Northern Reef System, you have time." His lips found the junction of her neck and shoulder, that spot he'd mapped years ago that made her breath catch. His other hand moved to her stomach, fingers splaying possessively. "Plenty of time," Sarah turned in his arms, meeting his eyes in the dim light. At 35, Marcus still had that earnest quality that had first attracted her, even if the expensive haircut and the unconscious confidence of wealth had layered over it. She touched his jaw, feeling the stubble there, and thought about the version of him that used to eat ramen 4 nights a week and get genuinely excited about open-source code repositories. "Tonight," she promised, her finger trailing down his chest, feeling the lean muscle beneath his skin. "When I get back from the institute, I'm holding you to that, Dr. Chen." His voice dropped an octave, and his hands gripped her hips with intent. "I have board meetings until 7, but after that, I'm all yours." She kissed him slowly, deliberately, then extracted herself from his embrace before she could change her mind about the boat departure. The cottage's smart systems had already adjusted the bathroom lighting to her preferences, had started the shower at exactly 38.5 degrees Celsius, had queued up her morning briefing on the bathroom mirror's display. Sarah watched her own reflection as she brushed her teeth. 32. No makeup, hair that needed cutting, the small scar on her left eyebrow from a close encounter with a hammerhead 3 years ago. She looked exactly like what she was, a working marine biologist who didn't have time for the elaborate beauty routines that Marcus's sister Victoria documented for her 8 million social media followers. The cottage was exactly as they'd left it 5 years ago, before the money. Books overflowing from shelves, fishing rods in the corner, her research equipment taking up half the spare bedroom, photos from their wedding on the mantel, the cheap wedding, the one where they'd served barbecue and beer and Marcus's mother had smiled with her mouth but not her eyes. On the mantel sat the framed photo from their first date, Sarah in waders and a flannel shirt, Marcus holding up a pathetic excuse for a rainbow trout, both of them grinning like idiots. She'd kissed him that day with fish-gutting hands, and he'd laughed and kissed her back and told her she was the most interesting woman he'd ever met. Sarah drove her 12-year-old Subaru past the waterfront mansions that had sprouted like mushrooms after the tech boom. Each one was more ostentatious than the last, with their holographic security systems and their climate-controlled vertical gardens and their DNA-locked gates. The car's navigation system, outdated by at least 5 years, stuttered through the route while newer vehicles with quantum processors glided past her in the express lanes. She didn't care. The Subaru ran fine, got her where she needed to go, and didn't require a retinal scan and 3 forms of biometric verification just to start the engine. The Pacific Northwest Marine Research Institute occupied a modest building on the waterfront, surrounded by much flashier biotech firms and AI development centers. Sarah parked in her usual spot, grabbed her field pack, and headed inside. The building's systems recognized her immediately. They recognized everyone, that was the world now, and displayed a cheerful greeting on every surface she passed. She'd disabled most of the features years ago, preferring to work without constant digital interruption. Her lab was a controlled chaos of equipment, samples, and data displays. Her research assistant, Kim, was already there, prepping the day's gear with the efficiency of someone who'd been doing this for 3 years and knew every piece of equipment intimately. Morning, Dr. Chen. Water temperatures up another 0.2 degrees in the northern sector. The sensors are picking up unusual migration patterns. Sarah pulled up the data on her workstation, studying the thermal imaging and movement tracking. The sharks were moving earlier than expected, pushed by warming waters and changing currents. It was the kind of pattern that would take months to analyze properly, years to understand fully, decades to see the full impact. This was why she'd gone into marine biology instead of something more lucrative, the long game. The patient observation, the understanding that some questions couldn't be answered quickly or profitably. Her phone buzzed. Marcus, board meeting ran long. Hate these things. Want to just go fishing with you instead. Love you, shark lady, she smiled despite herself, typing back, you are the board, babe. Suffer through it. I'll make it worth your while tonight. Smirking face, the memory surfaced unbidden. Marcus 5 years ago, nervous and earnest, asking her out despite having nothing to offer compared to the doctors and lawyers who'd pursued her with expensive dinners and confident assumptions. He'd taken her fishing instead, had fumbled with the rod, had asked about her research with genuine curiosity instead of polite condescension. His app had been just an idea then, something he worked on nights and weekends, something he thought might make a decent income if he was lucky. When Neuralink had exploded, when neural interface technology had suddenly become the next frontier and Marcus's elegant, intuitive user experience had put him at the center of it, he'd proposed with a fishing lure on a chain alongside a modest diamond. She still wore both on a necklace, tucked under her shirt where the Institute's environmental sensors couldn't catalog them as potential contaminants. Money doesn't change who we are, he'd said after the acquisition, after the first billion had cleared and his mother had started calling twice a week with opinions about their lifestyle. We're still us, Sarah had believed him. Still believed him, mostly. But his family had felt differently about the matter. The notification came through her phone at 10 a.m., interrupting her analysis of the morning's survey data. Eleanor Way requests your presence at her 65th birthday celebration. Saturday, 11 a.m. Penthouse address attached. Formal attire required, required. Not requested, not suggested. Required. Kim looked up from the sample she was processing. Everything okay? Family thing. Sarah closed the notification without responding to it. Eleanor Way didn't need a response. Eleanor Way expected compliance, and compliance was what she would get, because Marcus would be there and Sarah had learned to pick her battles carefully over the past 5 years. The mother-in-law, the same. Kim made a sympathetic noise. Everyone at the Institute knew about Marcus. It was impossible not to know when your spouse was on the cover of TechWealth magazine with alarming regularity, but Sarah had never discussed the family dynamics. What was there to say? That Eleanor Way had spent 5 years making it clear that her son had married beneath himself? That his sister Victoria posted carefully curated content showing the right kind of billionaire lifestyle while pointedly excluding Sarah from family photos? That his brother James made jokes about Sarah's salary in front of people who made 10 times what she did. The week ground forward. Survey dives. Data analysis, grant applications that needed writing, peer reviews that needed completing. The Institute's director mentioned the upcoming funding review. his tone carefully neutral, his implication clear. Having a connection to Marcus Way's wealth wouldn't hurt their chances. Sarah had smiled tightly and said nothing, because what could she say? That she'd rather the Institute succeed or fail on the merit of their work? That trading on her husband's name felt like a betrayal of everything she'd built herself? That the director's casual assumption that she'd leverage personal relationships for professional gain made her want to quit on the spot. She went home each night to the cottage. To Marcus cooking dinner in their small kitchen or working on his laptop at the dining table, his tie loosened and his sleeves rolled up. They fell into their familiar rhythms, discussing her research, his latest acquisition target, the book they were both reading, the podcast she'd recommended. They made love with the easy intimacy of people who knew each other's bodies thoroughly, who could communicate desire and affection without elaborate performance. It was simple. It was enough. It had always been enough, but Saturday arrived with the inevitability of a death sentence, and Sarah stood in their bedroom staring at her closet with something approaching despair. Formal attire required. She owned exactly 2 dresses that could qualify as formal, the one from their wedding, which no longer fit quite right, and a simple black number she'd bought for conferences. Neither would pass muster at Eleanor Way's penthouse, where formal meant designer labels and this season's cuts and the kind of dress that cost more than Sarah's monthly salary. Marcus appeared in the doorway, already dressed in a tailored suit that had probably cost 5 figures. He looked good, he always looked good now. In a way that made her remember he was a billionaire who could have his pick of anyone, and his expression when he saw her face was equal parts sympathy and resignation. She sent something over, he said, holding up a garment bag. For you. Sarah's jaw tightened. I have a dress, I know you do. He didn't move, didn't push. But she'll make comments. All day. You know she will, let her make comments, Sarah. He crossed to her, set the garment bag on the bed, took her hands. Pick your battles. Please. Today's about celebrating her birthday, getting through it, and leaving. If wearing the dress she sent means fewer comments about your charming bohemian style, just wear it. Sarah looked at the garment bag, then at Marcus, then back at the bag. Every fiber of her being wanted to refuse. Wanted to show up in her conference dress with her head high and dare Eleanor to say something. But Marcus was right, it wasn't about pride, it was about surviving the day with minimal damage. She'd learned that lesson slowly, painfully, over 5 years of family gatherings. She opened the garment bag. The dress was beautiful, objectively. A deep emerald that would look stunning against her skin tone, a cut that would flatter her figure, designer label prominently displayed on the tag. It was also armor, a costume, a reminder that she didn't belong in her own skin at these events. Eleanor Way's taste imposed on Sarah Chen's body. It's lovely, Marcus said quietly. You'll look beautiful. I look beautiful in my own clothes. You look beautiful in everything. Including that dress. He kissed her forehead. Get dressed. I'll drive. The penthouse occupied the top 3 floors of the newest luxury tower downtown, the kind of building where the elevators required biometric verification and the lobby had armed security with neural enhancement implants. Marcus's hand found the small of Sarah's back as they rode up, a gesture of support and possession that she leaned into despite herself. The dress fit perfectly, of course it did. Eleanor would have obtained Sarah's measurements from some medical database or biometric scan, and Sarah had paired it with her own simple jewelry. The fishing lure necklace hidden beneath the dress's neckline like a secret talisman. The elevator doors opened directly into the penthouse, and Sarah's stomach dropped. The space was enormous, floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the city and the water beyond. Everything was white and chrome and aggressively modern, with holographic art installations rotating through various displays and smart surfaces responding to guests' movements with subtle lighting changes. At least 50 people filled the main room, all of them dressed in clothes that cost more than Sarah's car, all of them radiating the particular confidence of people who measured their worth in billions rather than millions. Eleanor Way stood at the center of it all, resplendent in designer everything, her jewelry probably worth more than the Institute's annual operating budget. She was holding court with a group of similarly adorned women, her laugh carrying across the room with practiced grace. When she saw Marcus and Sarah, her smile didn't falter, but something in her eyes sharpened. "Marcus. Darling." She glided over, air-kissed Marcus's cheeks, then turned to Sarah. "Sarah. How lovely. The dress fits well, thank you for sending it." Sarah kept her voice neutral, pleasant. "Happy birthday, Eleanor, 65 and fabulous, as they say." Eleanor's gaze traveled over Sarah from head to toe. Lingering on her simple jewelry, her minimal makeup, her hair that Sarah had styled herself rather than visiting a salon. So refreshing to see someone embrace the natural look. Very brave in this crowd, the words landed like paper cuts, small and stinging. Marcus's hand tightened fractionally on Sarah's back. "Sarah's always been confident in her own skin," he said, his tone light but with an edge. "It's one of the things I love about her, of course, darling." Of course. Eleanor was already looking past them, toward the next arrivals. "Victoria's around somewhere with her new boyfriend. You should find her. And James is in the library with some potential investors. Mingle." She swept away, leaving them standing in the entrance like children dismissed from an audience with royalty. 2 hours, Marcus murmured. "We stay 2 hours, make an appearance, and leave," Sarah nodded, accepting the champagne that a server offered from a tray that probably cost more than her Subaru. The champagne was excellent, of course. Everything here would be excellent, carefully curated, obscenely expensive. She took a small sip and tried not to calculate how much of the Marine Institute's funding could be covered by the cost of this party alone. Victoria found them before they'd made it 3 steps into the room. Marcus's sister had always been beautiful in that carefully constructed way that required teams of professionals and constant maintenance. Today she was especially polished, her dress a deliberate display of wealth and taste, her date a tall man with the kind of perfectly styled hair that suggested regular neural stimulation treatments for optimal follicle health. "Marcus." "Sarah." Victoria's hug was performative, her phone already out and recording. "You both look amazing." "Sarah, is that the dress Mom sent? It looks so good on you. Totally elevates your whole vibe." She turned to her date. "Trevor, this is my brother Marcus and his wife Sarah. Sarah's a marine biologist. She studies fish." The pause before wife was so brief Sarah almost missed it. Almost. Trevor Caldwell extended a hand, his grip firm and brief. His smile professional. "The marine biologist. Marcus mentioned you. Fascinating field. Very niche." His tone made niche sound like unemployed. "Sarah's work has influenced policy on 3 continents, Marcus said, his voice carrying just enough edge to be noticeable. "She discovered 2 new species last year. That's incredible." Victoria's enthusiasm was as genuine as her eyelashes. "Trevor's in venture capital. He's invested in some amazing companies. His last fund returned 43%. "Isn't that wild?" "Impressive," Sarah said, because something needed to be said. Trevor launched into an explanation of his investment strategy, name-dropping companies and founders with the casual confidence of someone who'd never doubted his place in the world. Victoria hung on his every word, her phone still recording, her face arranged in an expression of adoring attention that would play well for her followers. Sarah sipped her champagne and tried to calculate the environmental impact of the rare earth minerals required to power all the smart systems in this building alone. So Sarah, Trevor said, turning to her with the air of someone making polite conversation, what made you pursue marine biology? The earning potential? The table of people nearby went quiet, and Sarah felt Marcus tense beside her. I wanted to contribute something meaningful to the world, Sarah said evenly. Right. Passion projects. Trevor's smile was indulgent. Those are great hobbies. Must be nice to be able to support that kind of thing. He directed this last part to Marcus, man to man, as if Sarah weren't standing right there. Marcus's jaw tightened. Sarah's work has influenced policy on 3 continents and discovered 2 new species. What did your last investment do? Make rich people richer? The tension crystallized, sharp and sudden. Victoria laughed nervously, her phone still recording everything for the algorithm to analyze and optimize later. Trevor's smile froze in place, and Sarah felt a surge of gratitude and despair in equal measure. Marcus defending her only highlighted that she needed defending, that she was out of place here. That everyone could see the disparity between the brilliant tech billionaire and his modestly accomplished wife. I think I need some air, Sarah said, setting down her champagne glass and moving toward the balcony before anyone could respond. The balcony was blessedly empty, the city spread out below in a glittering display of wealth and technology. Sarah gripped the railing, real metal, cold and solid, and breathed deeply, trying to center herself. This was why she hated these events. Not because of the obvious wealth, not even because of the subtle cruelty, but because they made her feel small in a way nothing else did. In her lab, on her boat, in the water with the sharks, she was competent and confident and sure of her purpose. Here, she was Marcus Way's wife who didn't quite measure up, who wore the wrong clothes and had the wrong priorities and made the wrong amount of money. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Hey. Didn't mean to weird you out yesterday. I'm sure Marcus is just fishing. Trevor says those lodge experiences are very exclusive though. Only the ultra-wealthy go. Must be nice. Smiling face with smiling eyes. Yesterday? Sarah frowned, then remembered, Victoria had cornered her in the bathroom earlier, during the pre-party setup Sarah had been roped into helping with. The conversation had been brief, Victoria touching up her makeup while making casual comments about Marcus's annual fishing trip, about how all wealthy men had their little escapes, about how Trevor had mentioned that exclusive lodges sometimes had entertainment for their high-profile guests. Sarah had dismissed it at the time as Victoria being Victoria, stirring up trouble for no reason beyond boredom, but now Victoria had texted her. And attached to the text was a link to an article, Inside Billionaire's Secret Boys Clubs, What Really Happens at Exclusive Wilderness Retreats. Sarah's thumb hovered over the link. She knew what this was, manipulation, pure and simple. Victoria planting seeds of doubt because Misery loved company and Victoria's relationship with Trevor seemed more transactional than emotional. But knowing it was manipulation didn't stop Sarah's brain from completing the logical chain. Marcus gone for a week every year. No wives allowed. Boys being idiots in the woods as his only explanation. His best friend Ray who still lived in a studio apartment despite Marcus's wealth. The lodge that Duke the seaplane pilot had called exclusive and expensive. Sarah didn't click the link. Instead, she pocketed her phone and returned to the party. Because standing alone on the balcony would only invite more comments and more concern. The living room had filled up even more in her absence, bodies everywhere, conversations overlapping, the air thick with perfume and ambition and the particular energy of people trying to impress each other. James Way found her at the bar, his wife Cassandra hanging off his arm like an expensive accessory. Marcus's brother had always been the least subtle of the siblings, his hedge fund success giving him license to say whatever crossed his mind without filter or tact. Sarah. There's my favorite sister-in-law. James's voice was too loud, his champagne glass too empty. Still saving the fishies? That's so sweet. How much does that pay now? 6 figures yet, he knew exactly what it paid. They'd had this conversation at every family gathering for 5 years. 78,000, Sarah said, because refusing to answer would only prolong the game. Plus grant funding for research projects. 78. That's adorable. James clapped Marcus on the shoulder. You must have the most expensive marine biologist in the world, bro. Talk about a luxury hobby. Cassandra giggled, her hand over her mouth. James, stop, but she didn't mean it, and James didn't stop, and Sarah felt Marcus's hand find hers under cover of the bar top, squeezing gently. 2 hours, she reminded herself. They'd been here 45 minutes. She could survive another 75. The party continued around them, a carefully orchestrated display of wealth and status. Eleanor circulated through the crowd, accepting congratulations and gifts with practiced grace. The gifts themselves were extravagant: artwork, jewelry, promises of vacation homes and yacht trips. When Marcus presented his gift, a donation to Eleanor's favorite charity in her name, Eleanor's smile was tight. How thoughtful, darling. Though I do hope you're saving appropriately for your own future. And grandchildren, of course. When should I expect grandchildren? The question landed like a bomb in the middle of the conversation circle that had formed around them. Sarah felt every eye turn toward her, assessing, judging. She and Marcus had talked about children, had agreed they wanted them eventually, but eventually felt very far away when Sarah was in the middle of a multi-year research project and Marcus was navigating a complex acquisition. When we're ready, Marcus said firmly. Which isn't your concern, Mom. Eleanor's laugh was bright and artificial. Of course not, darling. I'm just saying, Victoria and Trevor are talking about starting a family soon. It would be lovely for cousins to be close in age. Victoria and Trevor had been dating for 3 months. Sarah caught the look that passed between the siblings, something sharp and competitive and old. The meal was served on the penthouse's terrace, at a table that could seat 60 people comfortably. Sarah found herself placed between a tech CEO who ignored her completely and a biotech investor who peppered her with questions about the commercial applications of her research. Neither conversation was pleasant. The food was molecular gastronomy pretending to be dinner, each course more conceptual than the last, and Sarah found herself missing the simple pasta dinners she and Marcus made together in their cottage kitchen. Halfway through the meal, Cassandra's voice carried across the table, too loud and too curious. Sarah, do you ever worry about Marcus being gone for a whole week on his fishing trips? I'd die not knowing what James was doing. Those lodges hire such pretty staff, you know. The table went silent. Every head turned towards Sarah, waiting for her response. Eleanor's expression was carefully neutral. Victoria's was hungry. I trust my husband, Sarah said evenly. Of course you do. Cassandra was earnest in her drunkenness. I just mean, Marcus is so gorgeous and rich now. If I were you, I'd be. Cassandra, that's enough. Eleanor's voice cut through the babble with surgical precision. This is a celebration, not an inquisition, but the damage was done. Sarah caught the look exchanged between Eleanor and Victoria: satisfaction, calculation, the particular pleasure of people who'd successfully planted doubt. Across the table, Marcus was checking his phone, and Sarah could see the screen, messages about final cabin arrangements and make sure everything's ready for the kids. Kids? What kids? Was that code for something? Sarah's rational brain knew she was being manipulated, knew that Victoria and Cassandra and even Eleanor were working together to undermine her confidence. But her irrational brain, the one that had been subjected to 5 years of subtle humiliation, 5 years of being told she wasn't enough, couldn't quite dismiss the questions. Why couldn't she ever go on the fishing trips? Why was it always just Marcus and Ray? What happened at those exclusive lodges that required such secrecy? She made it through the rest of the meal on autopilot, smiling and nodding and saying the right things at the right times. When dessert finally arrived, some elaborate construction of sugar and molecular foam, Sarah excused herself to the bathroom, needing a moment away from the scrutiny and the questions and her own spiraling thoughts. The bathroom was larger than her and Marcus's bedroom, all marble and gold fixtures and smart mirrors that probably analyzed your skin and offered targeted beauty recommendations. Sarah splashed water on her face carefully, trying not to ruin the minimal makeup she'd applied. In the mirror, she looked tired and out of place, like someone playing dress-up in borrowed clothes at a party where she didn't know the rules. Her phone buzzed again. "Victoria, are you okay? You seemed upset at dinner." "I really didn't mean to start anything. Trevor just mentioned that those fishing lodges are where all the tech bros go to blow off steam, if you know what I mean. But I'm sure Marcus isn't like that." "He married you for love, right?" Sarah stared at the message, at the carefully crafted concern, at the poisonous insinuation wrapped in friendly worry. She should delete it. Should block Victoria's number. Should march back out to the party and tell Marcus exactly what his sister was doing. Instead, she found herself Googling exclusive Canadian fishing lodges and scrolling through photos of pristine wilderness and luxury accommodations and, yes, attractive staff in form-fitting uniforms. She hated herself for looking, hated Victoria for making her look, hated the small, insecure part of herself that wondered if maybe Marcus's family was right, if maybe she wasn't enough, if maybe a billionaire needed more than a marine biologist who drove a Subaru and wore thrift store flannels. When she returned to the party, Marcus was deep in conversation with James and several other men, their body language suggesting business rather than pleasure. Sarah collected another glass of champagne and found a relatively quiet corner where she could observe without participating. The party swirled around her, a performance of wealth and status that she would never quite understand, no matter how many events she attended. 2 hours became 3, then 4. By the time Marcus finally extracted them from the party, Sarah felt scraped raw, her smile muscles aching from the effort of maintaining pleasant neutrality. They rode the elevator down in silence, Marcus's hand on her back, neither of them speaking until they were in his car, not the Subaru, but the sleek electric vehicle he drove to business functions, heading back toward the cottage. "I'm sorry," Marcus said finally, his eyes on the road. "She's impossible." "They're all impossible. It's fine, it's not fine." Trevor was a dick, Victoria was stirring up shit, and Cassandra, he sighed. James needs to have a serious conversation with his wife about appropriate topics of conversation. She was drunk. She's always drunk at these things, and she always says something designed to make you uncomfortable. Marcus's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "I hate that you have to deal with this. I hate that my family makes you feel, what? Small? Inadequate? Like I'm not good enough for you?" The words came out sharper than Sarah intended, 5 years of accumulated resentment suddenly bubbling to the surface. Marcus pulled over, right there on the side of the road, and turned to face her fully. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me. You know that, right? Before the money, before any of this, you chose me when I was just some programmer with an idea and a dream. You've never cared about the billions. You've never asked me to change, you've never made me feel like I need to be anything other than myself. That's everything, Sarah. That's more than my entire family understands about value." Sarah wanted to believe him. She did believe him, mostly. But Victoria's text messages sat heavy in her phone, and Cassandra's drunken comments echoed in her head, and she couldn't quite shake the feeling that there was something Marcus wasn't telling her about those fishing trips. "Why can't I ever come with you?" The question emerged before she could stop it. "To the lodge." Why is it always just you and Ray and no wives allowed? Marcus's expression cycled through surprise and confusion before landing on understanding and something that looked almost like guilt. Because it's 1 week a year, that's just simple. No boards, no investors, no pressure. Just guys being idiots in the woods. You have your research expeditions. I have this. Ray lives in a studio apartment, Marcus. If these are such exclusive, expensive lodges, how does he afford them? I pay for Ray. Marcus said it simply, as if it were obvious. He's been my best friend since college. Of course I pay. What happens there? We fish. We drink beer. We talk about nothing important. Ray sings terrible karaoke after his third whiskey. Marcus reached for her hand. That's it, Sarah. I swear to you. That's all it is. She wanted to believe him. She did believe him. But the doubt had been planted. And it grew in the fertile soil of her insecurity, nurtured by 5 years of being told she wasn't enough. That night, back at the cottage, Marcus made love to her with an intensity that felt almost desperate, as if he were trying to prove something through touch and breath and whispered words. Sarah responded, let herself get lost in the familiar geography of his body, the way he knew exactly how to make her gasp and arch and forget everything except the present moment. Afterward, they lay tangled together in their bed, his arm heavy across her waist, his breathing evening out into sleep. Sarah stared at the ceiling, listening to the soft hum of the cottage's environmental systems and the distant call of that loon across the lake. In the darkness, with Marcus's warmth beside her, Victoria's poison seemed laughable, impossible. This was her husband. This was their life. Nothing had changed except the zeros in their bank account, but as sleep finally claimed her, Sarah's last conscious thought was of those text messages, those insinuations, those carefully planted seeds of doubt. And she wondered, just for a moment, just before dreams took her, what Marcus Way really did during his annual week away. Sarah stood in the doorway of the Way family estate, her hand resting protectively over her still flat stomach, and watched Marcus hand his keys to the valet like he was surrendering a weapon. The house loomed before them, all glass and steel and carefully curated minimalism that cost more per square foot than most people earned in a year. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, she could see Eleanor moving through the dining room, her silver hair swept into a chignon so severe it probably required architectural consultation. Last chance to fake food poisoning, Marcus murmured, his fingers finding hers. Sarah squeezed back. And Miss Victoria's news? I'd rather swim with hammerheads without a cage. That's oddly specific. I've done it. The sharks were better company. Marcus's laugh was sharp and nervous. He'd been quiet on the drive over, his jaw working in that way it did when he was preparing for battle. Sarah had spent the flight home from Alaska rehearsing this moment, but now that they were here, now that she could smell Eleanor's signature Hermes candles wafting through the open door and hear James's braying laugh from somewhere inside, her throat felt tight. The week at the lodge had been a revelation. She'd watched Marcus teach those kids with a patience and generosity that his own family had never bothered to recognize. She'd seen Ray and Jerome look at her husband with genuine respect, not the calculating assessment that characterized every Way family interaction. And she'd realized, with a clarity that felt like cold water, that she'd been complicit in her own diminishment. Every time she'd worn the appropriate dress to family dinners. Every time she'd smiled through Victoria's barbs about her quaint career. Every time she'd let Eleanor's subtle corrections go unchallenged. That ended tonight. Eleanor appeared in the doorway before they reached it. Her expression arranged in what she probably thought was warmth but looked more like a hostess greeting guests she'd rather have cancelled on. Marcus. Sarah. You're late. We're 5 minutes early, Marcus said. Exactly. Eleanor's eyes swept over Sarah's dress, a simple navy sheath she'd owned for 3 years, and Sarah watched the minute tightening around her mouth. "Well, come in. Victoria's been waiting." The dining room was already a stage set for judgment. James sprawled in his chair at one end of the table, his wife Cecilia beside him scrolling through her phone with the glazed expression of someone who'd checked out of her marriage years ago. Victoria held court at the center. Her dress a architectural marvel of white silk that probably cost more than Sarah's first car. Her husband David sat at her elbow, silent and decorative as always. And at the head of the table, in the chair that had belonged to Marcus's father, sat Eleanor, presiding over her kingdom like a general surveying troops she suspected might mutiny. "Baby brother." Victoria rose, air-kissing Marcus on both cheeks. Her eyes slid to Sarah. "Sarah. That's a lovely dress." "Very practical, thanks. I wore it to a conference on shark conservation last year. Got blood on the hem but it washed right out." Victoria's smile flickered. "How rustic." Sarah felt Marcus's hand on her lower back, steadying. She'd promised herself she wouldn't take the bait, wouldn't engage in Victoria's games. But God, it was hard. They took their seats, Marcus and Sarah on one side, Victoria and David opposite, James and Cecilia bracketing Eleanor's end. The seating arrangement was deliberate, Sarah knew. Eleanor always positioned people like pieces on a chessboard, calculating sight lines and power dynamics. Tonight, Sarah and Marcus were placed where Eleanor could watch them directly, where every micro-expression would be catalogued and assessed. A server appeared with the first course, some architectural construction of foam and microgreens that Victoria immediately photographed for her social feeds. Sarah watched her type quickly, probably something about intimate family dinners that would reach 2 million followers before dessert. "So," Eleanor said, cutting through the chatter with surgical precision. "Marcus. Your Alaska trip. How was the fishing?" Sarah felt Marcus tense beside her. They'd agreed on the plane to control the narrative, but Eleanor had fired the first shot before they'd even finished the amuse-bouche. "Excellent," Marcus said. "Ray sends his regards." "How lovely." Eleanor's tone suggested it was anything but. "And you took an entire week. Your first vacation in 3 years. You must have been desperate for a break from work." There it was, the implication that Marcus was neglecting his responsibilities. That his absence was frivolous. Sarah saw James smirk into his wine glass. "Actually," Sarah said, her voice carrying clearly across the table, "Marcus wasn't just fishing. He was teaching." The room went still. Victoria's phone lowered. Eleanor's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Teaching," Eleanor repeated, making it sound like Marcus had admitted to day trading in his underwear. "A leadership program," Marcus said. "For teenagers. Ray and I have been running it for 3 years." Sarah watched the information land. Eleanor's face remained composed, but her fingers tightened on her fork. Victoria's expression cycled through confusion, calculation, and what might have been genuine curiosity before settling on practiced disinterest. "How philanthropic," Victoria said finally. "Though I'm surprised you didn't mention it before. I manage several charity initiatives myself. We could have collaborated." "It's not a photo op," Sarah said. The words came out sharper than she'd intended, but she didn't regret them. The kids don't need their faces plastered on your Instagram. They need actual investment. Victoria's eyes narrowed. "I'm not sure what you're implying." "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating it directly." Sarah leaned forward slightly. "Marcus has been funding a program that identifies brilliant kids from disadvantaged backgrounds and gives them mentorship, business training, and seed money for their ideas. No press. No publicity. Just results." "How much?" James asked. He'd straightened in his chair, suddenly interested. That's not really, Marcus started, 100,000 a year, Sarah said. Plus individual investments in their startups. The silence that followed was profound. Sarah could see Eleanor calculating, her brain probably already categorizing this information under waste of resources or misguided do-gooding. James looked genuinely shocked. Victoria's expression was harder to read, there was something almost hungry in her eyes. 100,000, Eleanor said slowly. Per year. For 3 years, best money I've ever spent, Marcus said. His voice was quiet but firm. One of our first participants just got accepted to MIT on a full scholarship. Another opened a restaurant in Portland. Another, is this why you've been distant? Eleanor interrupted. Why you've been avoiding family obligations? To play teacher to strangers? They're not strangers, Sarah said. Not anymore. And Marcus hasn't been avoiding anything. He's been building something real while the rest of you have been counting Instagram likes. The words hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Cecilia actually looked up from her phone. David shifted uncomfortably. Victoria's jaw tightened in a way that would have been imperceptible if Sarah hadn't spent 5 years studying every micro-expression in this family. Sarah, Eleanor said, her voice dropping into a register that probably made corporate boards weep, I understand you come from a different background. That you have different values. But in this family, we don't air private matters or make accusations. Different background, Sarah repeated. You mean poor. You can say it, Eleanor. I grew up in a house where we counted pennies and my dad worked 3 jobs. Marcus and I lived in a 500 square foot apartment when we met. I know you think that makes me less than. I know you've spent 5 years waiting for Marcus to wake up and realize he married down, Sarah. Marcus's hand found hers under the table, but she couldn't stop now. The words were coming like water through a broken dam, but here's what's funny, she continued. That man you think married down? He's the best person in this room. He's got more integrity in his fishing tackle box than this entire family has in its stock portfolio. And while you've all been performing success on social media and throwing parties to impress people you don't even like, he's been actually changing lives. So yeah, different background. Different values. Thank God, the silence was absolute. Sarah could hear her own heartbeat, loud and fast in her ears. She'd done it, said everything she'd been swallowing for 5 years. And it felt terrifying and exhilarating and right. Eleanor's face had gone pale, then red, then settled into a marble coldness that was somehow worse. Marcus. Control your wife. No, Marcus said simply. Eleanor blinked. Excuse me, I said no. Marcus stood, pulling Sarah up with him. Sarah's right. About all of it. I have been avoiding family obligations, because every time we come here, you make her feel small. You judge her clothes, her career, her background. You've spent 5 years trying to make her into someone she's not. Someone like you, Marcus, Eleanor started, I'm not finished. His voice was steel wrapped in velvet. You want to know why I didn't tell you about the program? Because I knew exactly what would happen. You'd criticize it as wasteful. Victoria would want to turn it into content. James would question the ROI. You'd find some way to make something good into something that reflects poorly on me, because that's what this family does. We perform success instead of actually achieving it. That's not fair, Victoria said, but her voice lacked conviction, isn't it? When's the last time you did something without posting about it? When's the last time any of you measured success by impact instead of perception? James shifted forward. Listen, little brother, I get that you're having some kind of moment, but, shut up, James. The words were so unexpected, so completely out of character for Marcus's usual diplomatic approach, that James actually did. "You've been coasting on Dad's name for a decade. Your firm is mediocre at best. The only reason you're successful is because Mom keeps steering clients your way and making excuses for your mistakes." James's face went purple. Cecilia set down her phone entirely, suddenly riveted. "And Victoria?" Marcus turned to his sister. 2 million followers. Congratulations. How many of them know who you really are? How many have you had an honest conversation with? You've built an empire on a performance, and now you're trapped in it. You don't understand," Victoria started, but something in her voice cracked. "I understand perfectly. I understand that you're all so invested in looking successful that you've forgotten what actual success feels like." Marcus pulled Sarah closer to his side. "Sarah swims with sharks. She's discovered species that changed conservation policy. She works with governments and research teams. And she comes home covered in fish guts and happier than any of you have ever been in your designer clothes and luxury cars. That's real. That's meaningful. And if you can't see that, if you can't respect her, then we're done here." Eleanor stood slowly, her hands flat on the table. "You would choose her over your family, every time," Marcus said without hesitation. Every single time. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them back. "Not here. Not in front of Eleanor." "Then perhaps," Eleanor said, her voice like ice cracking, "you should leave." "We will," Sarah said. "But first, Victoria, what was your news? You said you had an announcement." Victoria looked between her mother and brother, clearly calculating. Then something shifted in her face, some decision made. "I'm stepping back from social media," the room erupted. Eleanor looked genuinely shocked. James laughed, then stopped when he realized Victoria was serious. "What do you mean stepping back?" Eleanor demanded. "I mean I'm done performing my life for strangers." Victoria's voice was quiet but firm. "David and I are trying for a baby. Have been for 2 years. Every month we fail. I have to post about brunch or fashion or whatever bullshit keeps the algorithm happy, and I'm exhausted. I'm just exhausted." The vulnerability in Victoria's admission was staggering. Sarah watched her sister-in-law's carefully constructed facade crack. Watched real emotion bleed through. For the first time in 5 years, Sarah saw an actual person behind the performance. "Victoria," Eleanor said slowly, dangerously. "You're having a moment. We can discuss this privately." "No." Victoria looked at Marcus, then at Sarah. "You're right. Both of you. I've been so busy curating my life that I've forgotten to actually live it. And watching you too, God, it's infuriating how happy you are. How real you are." "Victoria," David reached for her hand, looking equally shocked and hopeful. "I'm not saying I'm going to delete everything or become a hermit," Victoria continued. "But I need to find something real. Something that matters more than likes and comments." She laughed, sharp and self-deprecating. "Maybe I'll volunteer with your program, Marcus. God knows I need to remember what actual accomplishment feels like." Eleanor sat down heavily. For the first time since Sarah had known her, Eleanor looked genuinely lost. "This is what happens," she said quietly, "when you marry outside the family's expectations. This chaos. This rebellion, this honesty," Marcus corrected. "This is what happens when people stop pretending." Sarah felt the anger drain out of her, replaced by something sadder and more complex. These people weren't villains. They were just trapped by expectations and performances and the suffocating weight of their own carefully constructed images. Eleanor especially, Sarah realized. How long had she been performing? Had there ever been a real woman under the armor, or had she disappeared so long ago that even she couldn't remember? We should go, Marcus said softly, his hand on Sarah's back. Wait. Eleanor's voice stopped them. The program. These teenagers. Tell me about them. Marcus and Sarah exchanged a glance. It was probably a trap. Eleanor didn't do vulnerability or genuine curiosity. But something in her face looked almost hungry. There's a girl named Destiny, Sarah said carefully. She's been in foster care since she was 6. She's a math genius who wants to study fashion and business. Another kid, Carlos, his parents are migrant workers. He's the first in his family to even imagine college, and you're funding their educations, Eleanor said. We're investing in their potential, Marcus corrected. There's a difference. Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. Then, I'd like to meet them. No, Sarah said immediately. Eleanor's eyes snapped to her. Excuse me, these aren't props for you to parade around or tax write-offs to make you feel better about yourself. They're people. Kids who've been let down by every adult in their lives. They don't need your judgment or your charity. They need actual investment. You think I'm incapable of that. I think you're incapable of doing it without getting something in return. Recognition. Control. Some way to make it about you. Eleanor's jaw tightened, but she didn't argue. Couldn't argue, because Sarah was right and they both knew it. Maybe that's true, Eleanor said finally. Maybe I've forgotten how to do something without calculating the return. But Marcus, she looked at her son, really looked at him, and Sarah saw something crack in her expression. You're right. About all of it. I have been diminishing. Sarah. The program. You. Because if you can be happy without the things I spent my life accumulating, then what was it all for? The admission hung in the air, raw and unexpected. James looked away uncomfortably. Victoria's eyes were wet. Mom, Marcus said quietly. Don't. Eleanor held up a hand. Don't make this easier for me. I've been cruel to your wife. I've dismissed your work. I've measured worth by bank statements and social status because that's what I was taught to do, and I never questioned it. But watching you walk away just now, watching you choose her without hesitation, I realized something. You're the only one of my children who's actually successful. Not performatively successful. Actually successful. And I almost lost you because I couldn't see it. Sarah felt Marcus's hand tighten on hers. This was the moment they'd been building to, the confrontation, the revelation, the potential for actual change. But Sarah also knew that one honest moment didn't erase 5 years of subtle cruelty. Didn't erase the doubt Eleanor had planted, the way she'd made Sarah feel like an interloper in her own marriage. That's a start, Sarah said carefully. But words are easy, Eleanor. We've learned that this week. The kids we worked with, they've heard a lot of pretty words from adults who disappeared. If you actually want to be part of our lives, part of what Marcus is building, you need to show us. Not perform it. Actually show us. How? Eleanor asked. I don't know yet. But maybe start by asking yourself what you actually value. Not what looks good or maintains status. What actually matters to you when no one's watching. Eleanor nodded slowly. She looked smaller somehow. Less formidable. Human. Marcus tugged Sarah toward the door. We really should go. They made it to the foyer before Victoria caught up with them. Wait. Sarah. I'm sorry, Sarah turned. Victoria looked wrecked, mascara smudged, her perfect composure shattered. For what specifically? Sarah asked. It wasn't cruel, just honest. Victoria had 5 years of microaggressions to choose from, for implying you weren't enough for Marcus. For making you doubt him. For being so threatened by your actual happiness that I tried to poison it. Victoria's voice broke. You have what I want. Not the money or the success, the realness. And instead of learning from you, I tried to make you as miserable as I am. Sarah studied her sister-in-law. The admission seemed genuine, but Sarah had been fooled before. Still, the vulnerability in Victoria's face was hard to fake. I'm pregnant, Sarah said abruptly. Victoria's eyes widened. Marcus made a small sound of surprise. They hadn't planned to announce it like this, ambushed in the hallway. 8 weeks, Sarah continued. And I'm terrified that Eleanor's going to try to turn our kid into another way performance piece. Another child raised to value optics over substance. So if you're serious about change, if any of you are, that's what's at stake. Not just Marcus and me. Our child. Victoria reached out, then stopped, her hand hovering between them. Can I? Sarah nodded. Victoria's hand settled gently on Sarah's stomach, and something passed between them, not quite forgiveness, but maybe understanding. Maybe the beginning of something real. You're going to be an amazing mother, Victoria whispered. And that baby is going to be so lucky to have parents who actually know what matters. You'll figure it out too, Sarah said. When you have your baby, you'll figure out what's real. Victoria nodded, tears spilling over. Then she did something surprising, she hugged Sarah. Not the air kiss performance hug she usually deployed, but an actual embrace. Thank you, Victoria whispered. For not letting us destroy you. For fighting back. They pulled apart. Marcus was watching them with an expression Sarah couldn't quite read, hope and wariness mixed together. We should really go, he said again. This time they made it to the car. Marcus handed the valet his ticket, and they stood in the cool evening air, the Way estate glowing behind them like a spaceship preparing for launch. That was insane, Marcus said. That was necessary, you told them. About the baby, I told Victoria. There's a difference. Sarah leaned against him, suddenly exhausted. Was I wrong? To use the pregnancy like that? No. You were strategic. There's a difference. He kissed her temple. Though maybe warn me next time before you deploy nuclear options. Where's the fun in that? They stood in silence, watching the valet bring Marcus's car, his modest, 3-year-old sedan that Eleanor had made pointed comments about at every family gathering. Sarah loved that car. Loved that Marcus drove it by choice, not necessity. Do you think anything will actually change? Marcus asked. With Eleanor? Maybe. With Victoria? Sarah considered. I think she meant it. About stepping back. About finding something real. The question is whether she can actually do it, and us. Sarah turned to face him fully, her hands on his chest. We're good. We're always good. But Marcus, I need you to hear me on this. Our kid doesn't attend Way family events until we're absolutely sure they won't fuck them up. Until Eleanor proves she can value people over perception. Until we know for certain that our child won't grow up feeling like they have to perform to be loved. Agreed, Marcus said without hesitation. 100% agreed. The valet pulled up with the car. Marcus tipped him generously, another thing Eleanor criticized, tipping excessively, and held Sarah's door open. Home? He asked. Home, Sarah confirmed. The real one. With the fish tank and the stained couch and the kitchen where we actually cook, Marcus grinned. The kitchen where I'm going to make you pasta and then thoroughly demonstrate how much I love you. Subtle. You think I'm being subtle? I'm literally announcing my intentions to seduce my pregnant wife with carbs and oral sex. Sarah laughed, the tension of the evening finally breaking. Drive faster. They pulled away from the Way estate, and Sarah watched it recede in the side mirror. all that glass and steel and carefully curated perfection growing smaller and less significant. She thought about the kids at the lodge, about Destiny's fierce intelligence and Carlos's quiet determination. About the world she and Marcus were building that had nothing to do with bank statements or social media metrics. Her hand drifted to her stomach, to the tiny cluster of cells that would become their child. A child who would grow up knowing that success wasn't measured in designer labels or Instagram followers. A child who would understand that real wealth was time spent doing what you loved with people who actually knew you. "What are you thinking?" Marcus asked, glancing over. "That we won," Sarah said simply. "Did we?" "Yeah. We did. Because we walked away. Because we stopped playing their game." She squeezed his hand. "And because no matter what happens with your family, whether Eleanor actually changes or Victoria finds her real self or James keeps being James, we have each other. We have what we're building. We have this baby." "That's winning." Marcus lifted her hand to his lips, kissed her knuckles. "I love you, I know. You married me when I had fish guts on my hands. Best decision of my life." They drove through the city, past the gleaming towers and luxury boutiques and all the carefully constructed markers of success that Sarah had spent 5 years feeling inadequate around. But tonight, looking at them through the car window, they just looked empty. Beautiful and empty and utterly meaningless. When they pulled into their driveway, their modest, unremarkable house in a neighborhood Eleanor had called transitional with barely concealed horror, Sarah felt something settle in her chest. This was home. This place they'd bought before the billions, before the way family descended with their expectations and judgments. This place that was theirs. Marcus unlocked the door, and their ancient cat, Professor Whiskers, adopted from a shelter and absolutely intolerable to Eleanor's allergies, wound around their ankles. The house smelled like the lavender Sarah kept in vases and the books Marcus collected compulsively. It was cluttered and lived in and perfect. "Pasta first or bedroom first?" Marcus asked, already pulling her toward him. "Bedroom," Sarah decided. "We've earned it. Plus I'm pregnant and allegedly get to make all the decisions now. That's not how pregnancy works, isn't it though?" Marcus was laughing as he kissed her, his hands already working the zipper of her dress, the practical navy dress that Victoria had sneered at. Sarah helped him, suddenly desperate to shed the evening like a second skin. They left a trail of clothes up the stairs, giggling like teenagers, the weight of the confrontation finally lifting. In their bedroom, their comfortable, normal bedroom with the king-size bed they'd saved for and the mismatched nightstands, Marcus laid Sarah down gently. His hand splaying across her stomach. "Hi, baby," he whispered to her belly. "Your mom just eviscerated my entire family, and it was the hottest thing I've ever witnessed," Sarah laughed, pulling him down. "Less talking. More demonstrating your devotion." "Yes, ma'am." They made love slowly, sweetly, with none of the urgent desperation from Alaska. This was different, a celebration, a claiming, a reaffirmation. Marcus whispered against her skin how proud he was, how fierce she'd been, how lucky he was. Sarah responded with soft gasps and clutching hands, her body singing under his touch. Afterward, tangled together in sheets they'd bought at Target, Sarah felt complete in a way she hadn't even at the lodge. Because this was theirs. Built by them, maintained by them, protected by them. No family expectations or social performances. Just them. "Think Eleanor will actually try?" Marcus asked, his fingers tracing idle patterns on her shoulder. "Maybe. Probably not in the way we want. But maybe enough." Sarah was quiet for a moment. "I feel bad for her, actually. Imagine spending your whole life performing, never questioning if you're actually happy. Never asking what you actually want." "You're more generous than I am." "No, I'm just thinking about our kid." About making sure they never have to choose between being themselves and being loved. She turned to face him. We're going to mess up, you know. As parents. We're going to make mistakes, probably, but we're going to mess up while trying to raise a good human. Not a successful human by way standards. A good human who knows their worth isn't tied to performance. Marcus kissed her forehead. Deal. They lay in comfortable silence, and Sarah thought about the week ahead. She had a research grant to write, a symposium to prepare for, a baby to grow. Marcus had his company to run. His program to expand, 15 teenagers counting on his continued investment. They had a life to build that had nothing to do with Eleanor's approval or Victoria's social media empire. Hey, Marcus said suddenly. Want to do something crazy? I'm pregnant and I just declared war on your family. How much crazier are we talking? Let's write a book. About the program. About the kids and what we're building. Nothing identifying, no photos, just their stories and the model we're using. So other people can replicate it. Sarah considered this. It was risky, it would expose what they'd been keeping private. But it would also scale the impact, create a framework for others to follow. And maybe, just maybe, it would inspire people like Eleanor to question what they were actually building with their wealth and influence. Yes, Sarah said. Let's do it. Let's tell the story right. I love you, Marcus said again. I know, Sarah replied. Now feed me. I'm pregnant and victorious and starving. They went downstairs in bathrobes, and Marcus made pasta while Sarah sat at their kitchen island, the one Eleanor had called provincial, and felt completely, utterly content. This was success. This moment, this kitchen, this man cooking carbonara in worn sweatpants while their rescue cat judged them from the counter. Her phone buzzed. A text from Destiny, Dr. Chen. Did you tell your family about us? Some woman named Victoria Wei just DM'd me asking about the program. Is that your sister-in-law? Sarah showed Marcus the message. They exchanged a look. Too soon to trust it? Marcus asked. Way too soon. But maybe not too soon to give her a chance to prove herself. Sarah texted back, that's Marcus's sister. She's complicated. But if she reaches out genuinely, not for content, just to learn, maybe hear her out, Destiny replied immediately, you trust her. Sarah thought about Victoria's tears, her admission of exhaustion, her hand on Sarah's stomach. Not yet. But I think she might be trying to earn it, good enough for me. By the way, Emma's asking if you'll come back and guest lecture next year. Bring the baby? Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. These kids, these brilliant, resilient, amazing kids who'd been invisible to people like Eleanor their whole lives. They wanted her back. They wanted to meet her baby, definitely bringing the baby, Sarah typed. Tell Emma I'll teach them to swim with sharks when they're old enough. You're the coolest, Dr. Chen. Mr. Wei too. You guys give me hope. Sarah set down her phone and looked at Marcus, who'd been reading over her shoulder. His eyes were wet. We're going to do this right, he said. All of it. The baby, the program, the book. We're going to build something real. We already have, Sarah replied. Everything else is just expansion. They ate pasta at midnight in their unremarkable kitchen, making plans and dreaming out loud. And somewhere across the city, in a glass mansion that looked more like a museum, Eleanor Wei sat alone in her study and wondered when she'd stopped being real. When performance had become more important than substance. And whether it was too late to learn the difference, but that was Eleanor's story to write. Sarah and Marcus had their own. Sarah Chin stood in the bathroom of Eleanor Wei's penthouse, staring at her reflection in a mirror that probably cost more than her monthly mortgage, and tried to remember why she'd agreed to come to this dinner. The answer, unfortunately, was simple. Marcus had asked. And after 5 years of marriage, she still couldn't say no to those brown eyes when he looked at her like she was the only person in the room who mattered, but Marcus wasn't in this bathroom. Victoria was, so, Victoria said, reapplying lipstick that Sarah recognized from a luxury campaign she'd seen plastered across every augmented reality billboard in the city. The color shifted subtly with Victoria's mood. Right now it was reading confident with an undertone of malicious. Trevor mentioned something interesting about Marcus's fishing trips. Sarah's hand stilled over the soap dispenser. The bathroom's smart system had already adjusted the water temperature to her preference, calculated her stress levels from her biometric signature, and was probably recording this entire conversation for Eleanor's home AI to analyze later. Privacy was theoretical in the Way family compound, did he? Sarah said flatly. Not a question. Victoria met her eyes in the mirror. She was beautiful in that calculated way that required a team. Her skin had that poreless quality that came from expensive gene therapy. Her hair fell in waves that defied physics and meteorology. Sarah's own hair was pulled back in a simple twist, still damp at the edges from the rain she'd walked through because Marcus had insisted on parking 3 blocks away at their favorite dumpling place instead of using the building's automated valet. Trevor said wealthy men have their extracurriculars, especially on those long trips away from home. Victoria's smile was sympathetic in the way a shark might be sympathetic before it bit. I just thought you should know. As family, the soap dispenser released exactly 1.5 milliliters of French lavender foam into Sarah's palm. She washed her hands slowly, buying time, trying to ignore the way her stomach had dropped. Marcus goes fishing with Ray. They'd been friends since college, of course. Victoria adjusted her dress, something that had probably required a wait list and a personal consultation with the designer. I'm sure it's innocent. I just know these lodges can be very accommodating for men with resources. Models, escorts, whatever helps them relax. She paused. You trust him completely, then? Sarah dried her hands on a towel that the bathroom system immediately whisked away into some hidden laundry dimension. She should say yes. Should defend her husband without hesitation. But Victoria's words had found something she'd been trying not to examine, the fact that Marcus had been taking these trips for 3 years and she'd never once asked to come along. The fact that he always came back relaxed and happy and slightly distant, like he'd been somewhere she couldn't follow. Of course I trust him, Sarah said, and hated how her voice sounded uncertain even to her own ears. Victoria's expression shifted to something that might have been genuine concern if Sarah didn't know better. I hope I'm wrong. I really do. It's just, you're not like us, Sarah. You didn't grow up in this world. You don't always see the signs. The implication was clear. Sarah was naive, unsophisticated. Out of her depth in the waters where the Way family swam, Sarah left the bathroom before she could say something she'd regret. The penthouse sprawled before her, all smart glass and floating furniture and art that probably cost more than her PhD had. Through the windows, the city stretched out in layers, the old architecture preserved at street level for tourism, the new construction rising in crystalline spires above, connected by transit tubes that glowed with bioluminescent algae. Advertising drones painted the sky with product placements that shifted based on who was looking. Right now, because the building's facial recognition knew Sarah was there, she saw an ad for a marine research grant she'd already applied for. The AI was optimistic. Sarah wasn't. Marcus stood near the windows with his brother James, both of them holding drinks that the penthouse's smart bar had mixed based on their current cortisol levels and personal preferences. James was talking with his hands, animated in that way that meant he was either explaining a deal or lying. Possibly both. Sarah's pocket buzzed. A message from Destiny. The teenager from the community center where Sarah volunteered, Dr. Chen. I got the internship. The fashion one. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Sarah smiled despite herself, typed back congratulations, and felt the knot in her stomach ease slightly. This was real, Destiny's excitement, her accomplishment. Not whatever game Victoria was playing. There she is, Eleanor's voice cut through the ambient music, some algorithmic composition that adjusted itself to the room's collective mood. Sarah, dear, come sit. Dinner's almost ready. Eleanor Way sat in the center of a curved sofa that probably had more computing power than the research vessel Sarah had spent 6 weeks on last summer. She was 70 but looked 50, thanks to the kind of age management protocol that cost more annually than Sarah's salary. Her jewelry was understated in the way that only truly expensive things could be, each piece a whisper rather than a shout, but the kind of whisper that carried across boardrooms and charity galas. Sarah sat in the chair opposite, which immediately adjusted itself to her body's pressure points. Thoughtful. Invasive. The Way family in microcosm. How's your work, dear? Eleanor asked. Still with the Sharks? 5 years. They'd been married 5 years, and Eleanor still made it sound like Sarah worked at a petting zoo, still studying apex predator behavior and its implications for ecosystem management, Sarah said evenly. I'm actually waiting to hear back about a grant that would let us expand our tracking program across 3 additional marine sanctuaries. How lovely. Eleanor's tone suggested it was anything but. Marcus mentioned you'd be traveling for that. Months at sea, if it comes through, there it was. The real question underneath. Sarah was selfish, prioritizing her little hobby over her husband. Never mind that Marcus traveled constantly for his company, that his fishing trips apparently required a week away from home 3 times a year. The fieldwork would be intensive, Sarah admitted. But Marcus understands. He's always supported my research, of course. Eleanor sipped something that looked like water but probably cost $50 a glass. He's very supportive. Though I do wonder sometimes if you appreciate how much he's sacrificed for your lifestyle. Sarah felt the words like a physical thing. Their lifestyle was a 3-bedroom cottage they'd bought before Marcus's company sold for an amount that made Sarah's head spin. They'd talked about moving, about getting something that reflected his current net worth, but Sarah loved their house. Loved the garden she'd planted, the kitchen where they cooked together. The mortgage they'd been paying down steadily until suddenly they didn't need to. What lifestyle is that, Eleanor? Sarah kept her voice pleasant. The one where we live in the house we bought together? Drive cars that run? Eat dinner at home most nights. The one where my son could be living in penthouses like this but instead stays in that cottage because his wife is uncomfortable with wealth. Eleanor's smile never wavered. I'm not criticizing, dear. It's very principled of you. I just hope Marcus doesn't wake up one day and resent what he's given up. Victoria emerged from the bathroom, her lipstick now reading serene with undertones of satisfaction. She'd done her job. Planted her seeds of doubt. Now Eleanor was watering them. Mom, Marcus appeared at Sarah's side, his hand finding her shoulder. Sarah doesn't keep me anywhere. I choose our life. Every part of it, of course, darling. Eleanor rose as the dining room's ambient system chimed softly. Dinner was ready. I'm simply saying that choices have consequences. That sometimes we sacrifice for love without realizing we're sacrificing it all. They moved to the table, which was already set with plates that adjusted their temperature based on what would be served. The food arrived via the penthouse's automated kitchen system, small portions of things that probably had names Sarah couldn't pronounce. She'd eaten a burger earlier, at the dumpling place, knowing this dinner would be performance art disguised as nutrition. So, James said, once everyone was seated. His wife Cassandra had appeared from wherever she'd been, probably the penthouse's meditation room or beauty pod or whatever other luxury amenity Eleanor had installed. Marcus. Trevor was telling me about these fishing trips of yours. Sarah's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Trevor. Victoria's fiancé, sitting beside her now, looking smug. Of course he'd talked to James too. This was coordinated. What about them? Marcus's voice was carefully neutral, just that you're very dedicated. Trevor's smile was all teeth. 3 times a year, full week each time. That's serious commitment to the hobby. It's important to me, Marcus said. I bet. James laughed. Hell, if Cassandra gave me permission to disappear for a week, I'd. James. Eleanor's voice was a surgical strike. Perhaps we could discuss something more appropriate for dinner, but the damage was done. The implication hung in the air. Marcus was escaping. From what or to what, they weren't saying directly, but Sarah could read the subtext in every glance, every carefully chosen word. She set down her fork. Marcus goes fishing with Ray. They've been friends since college. They stay at a lodge in Alaska and catch salmon and probably drink too much and tell terrible jokes. It's not mysterious. It's not suspicious. It's just friendship, of course, Victoria said sweetly. No one's suggesting anything else. We're just saying that a week is a long time. That's all. Cassandra leaned forward, her eyes bright with wine and malice. I wouldn't let James out of my sight for a week. Men are men, you know? They need supervision. Then you have a different marriage than we do, Sarah said. I trust Marcus. He trusts me. We don't need to supervise each other. How progressive, Eleanor murmured. Marcus's hand found Sarah's under the table, squeezed once. She squeezed back, but Victoria's words kept circling in her head. Models, escorts, whatever helps them relax. The kind of accommodations that came with money and privacy and a wife who was conveniently 1,000 miles away. Sarah had spent 5 years being the understanding wife. The one who didn't demand designer clothes or penthouses or jewelry that cost more than cars. The one who was happy with their simple life while Marcus's family sneered at her lack of ambition, her preference for substance over style. And now she was supposed to be understanding about weeks alone while her husband went somewhere she'd never been invited. The dinner continued. Courses appeared and disappeared. Conversation flowed around topics that felt designed to exclude Sarah, family friends she didn't know. Business deals she couldn't follow, social events she hadn't attended because they always fell during her research trips. Eleanor managed it all like a conductor, orchestrating small humiliations disguised as innocent questions. Sarah, dear, are you planning to have children? Eleanor asked as dessert arrived, something architectural that defied gravity. Eventually, Sarah said carefully. They'd talked about it, she and Marcus. Agreed to wait until her career was more established, until they'd figured out how to balance their lives. Eventually can become never before you know it, Eleanor said. And Marcus deserves heirs. The family deserves continuity, heirs. Like they were a dynasty instead of a family. Like Sarah's primary function was reproduction. We'll have children when we're ready, Marcus said firmly. Not according to anyone else's timeline, of course. Eleanor's smile could have cut glass. Though I do hope Sarah's research won't always take priority. A woman's career is important, but family comes first. Sarah opened her mouth to respond, to point out that Marcus's career took him away just as much, that she'd never once heard Eleanor suggest he prioritize family over business, but Marcus's hand tightened on hers. A warning or a plea, she wasn't sure. Sarah's research is groundbreaking, Marcus said. She's literally changing conservation policy. That matters. I'm sure it does. Eleanor's tone suggested otherwise. It's just that some contributions are more lasting than others. Sarah could publish 1,000 papers, but they'd still matter less than the family she builds. The words landed like they were meant to. Sarah had spent 5 years publishing papers, earning grants, building a reputation in her field. And according to Eleanor, it meant nothing. Would always mean nothing unless Sarah did the one thing that mattered to the Way family: produce the next generation. I need some air, Sarah said abruptly, standing. The chair adjusted smoothly, silently judging her departure. Excuse me, she walked to the balcony, let the smart glass door whisper shut behind her. The city stretched below, all light and motion, and millions of people who had no idea the Way family existed, much less cared. Advertising drones shifted their pitches as her biometric signature was detected. Suddenly she was seeing ads for pregnancy tests and fertility clinics and designer nursery furniture. The AI was helpful. The AI was a nightmare. Marcus followed her out. Of course he did. I'm sorry, he said quietly. They're impossible tonight, they're impossible every night. Sarah kept her eyes on the city. Your mother just told me my entire career means less than my uterus. Victoria implied you're cheating on me. James and Trevor backed her up. And you, she turned to face him. You just sat there, I defended you, you defended me like I needed defending. Like they had a point worth arguing against. The words came out sharper than she'd intended. I shouldn't need you to convince your family I'm good enough for you, Marcus. After 5 years, they should just know. He flinched. They do know. They're just, what? Protective? Concerned? Sarah laughed, sharp and bitter. They're bullies, Marcus. Your mother is a bully with good jewelry. Your sister is a bully with 2 million followers. And your brother is just a bully. But they're all bullies, and you let them make me feel like I'm the problem. You're not the problem, then what am I? The question hung between them. Because I'm not rich enough or ambitious enough or interested enough in their world. I'm not pregnant with your heirs. I'm not upgrading our house or our cars or our lifestyle to match your net worth. So what am I, exactly? In the Way family hierarchy, Marcus was quiet for a long moment. In the glow of the advertising drones, his face looked younger, more uncertain. You're my wife. The person I chose. The person I choose every day, even when I'm difficult? Even when I don't fit? Even when your family makes it very clear I'm an embarrassment, especially then. He moved closer, his hands finding her waist. Sarah, I don't care what they think. I never have. I care about you. About us. About the life we built. She wanted to believe him. Wanted to sink into his certainty and let it wash away everything Victoria had said, everything Eleanor implied, everything her own doubts whispered late at night when Marcus was traveling and she was alone in their cottage that apparently symbolized her selfishness. But Victoria's words kept circling. You don't always see the signs. Tell me about Alaska, Sarah said. Marcus blinked. What? Your fishing trips? Tell me what you do there. Where you stay. Who you see. Everything, Sarah, because you're right, I've never asked. I've been the cool wife who doesn't need details. Who trusts completely. But your family just spent 2 hours implying you're doing something other than fishing, and I realized I can't actually defend you because I don't know. So tell me. She watched something shift in his expression, surprise, maybe hurt, definitely wariness. I go fishing with Ray. We stay at a lodge. We fish, we drink, we decompress. That's it. What's the lodge called? The Northern Star. It's private, rustic. Ray found it years ago. And who else is there? Marcus's jaw tightened. Other fishermen. The staff. Sarah, what is this? This is me realizing I've been so focused on not being controlling that I've been completely oblivious. She stepped back from his embrace. You disappear for a week 3 times a year. You come back different, happy but distant. You've never once invited me, never suggested I come along. And when your family implies you're doing something shady, you don't laugh it off. You get defensive, because it's insulting. To both of us, is it though? Sarah hated the doubt in her voice, hated that Victoria had gotten under her skin. Because if it's just fishing, why not invite me? Why keep it so separate from the rest of your life? Marcus looked at her for a long moment, and Sarah saw something in his face she couldn't read. You're busy. Your research, don't. She held up a hand. Don't make this about my research. If you wanted me there, you'd ask. So why don't you want me there? The silence stretched between them, filled with all the things they weren't saying. Finally, Marcus spoke. Because it's mine. The one thing that's just mine, that I don't have to share or explain or justify. The one place where I'm not Marcus Way, billionaire CEO. I'm just Marcus, catching fish with my best friend. The honesty of it landed hard. Sarah understood, God, she understood better than anyone. Wasn't that what her research was? Her escape into a world where her last name didn't matter, where money was irrelevant, where she was judged solely on her skill and knowledge, but understanding didn't erase doubt. Didn't answer what exactly Marcus was escaping from. Or two, okay, she said quietly. I get it. I do. But Marcus, you need to understand what it looks like from the outside. What your family is implying. What I'm supposed to just trust without question. You don't trust me. He sounded genuinely hurt. I trust you. I don't trust that I know everything I should know. She met his eyes. If I showed up at that lodge unannounced, what would I find? She watched him process the question. Watched several emotions cross his face before settling into something resigned. You'd find me fishing. Teaching business classes to teenagers. Boring Ray with stories about you. Nothing remotely worth the suspicion Victoria's planted. Teaching business classes to teenagers? Sarah repeated slowly. Marcus sighed, ran a hand through his hair. It's a program. Ray and I started it 3 years ago. We bring kids from foster care and low-income families to the lodge, teach them financial literacy, entrepreneurship, networking. Give them tools they'd never otherwise access. Sarah stared at him. You've been running a mentorship program for 3 years and never mentioned it. I knew how it would sound. How my family would react. He looked miserable. Mom would want photo ops. Victoria would want it for her Instagram. James would question the ROI. They'd make it about them, about performance. These kids deserve better than that. So you kept it secret from me too? Your wife, I was going to tell you. He stopped, searching for words. You're going to Alaska next month for your research. I thought maybe I could bring you to the lodge after, show you the program, introduce you to the kids. Make it this whole thing instead of just dropping it in conversation. Sarah's anger deflated slightly, replaced by confusion. You're telling me that while your family was implying you're cheating, you've actually been teaching underprivileged teenagers? Yeah. Marcus laughed without humor. Though I'm realizing now how that sounds. How keeping it secret looks, it looks suspicious, Sarah said flatly. It looks like you have something to hide. I was hiding something good, not something bad. There's a difference, is there? Sarah wasn't sure anymore. 5 years of marriage, and she'd just discovered her husband had an entire secret project. Secret anything was bad, regardless of noble intentions. What else don't I know, Marcus? What else are you keeping private that you're planning to reveal at the perfect Instagram-worthy moment? That's not fair. Neither is finding out from your family's passive-aggressive implications that my husband has a whole life I know nothing about. Sarah moved toward the door. I need to go. Sarah, wait, I'm not leaving you. I'm leaving this dinner before I say something I'll regret to your mother. She paused, hand on the door. I'm glad you're helping kids. Really? But you should have told me. You should have trusted me enough to share this without waiting for the perfect moment. She went back inside, collected her coat, made polite excuses to Eleanor that fooled no one. Marcus followed her to the elevator, silent and tense. The ride down 70 floors was excruciating. The elevator played ambient music and showed news feeds and occasionally offered suggestions for restaurants nearby that matched their current stress levels and dietary preferences. Sarah ignored all of it, staring at her reflection in the polished metal doors. She looked tired. Worn. Like someone who'd spent 5 years trying to prove she belonged somewhere she fundamentally didn't fit. Her dress was nice but not designer. Her shoes were comfortable but not fashionable. Her entire appearance screamed outsider in the way families whirled of calibrated perfection. Marcus watched her watch herself. What are you thinking? That I'm tired of being not enough? You've always been enough, not for your family. She met his eyes in the reflection. And maybe not for you either, if you can't be honest with me about where you go and what you do for a week at a time. That's not. The elevator doors opened onto the parking garage. Their car, Marcus's modest sedan that he insisted on keeping despite being able to afford an entire fleet, was exactly where they'd left it. Surrounded by vehicles worth more than most houses, they drove in silence through the city, past the preserved historical districts and into the suburbs where people actually lived instead of just kept penthouses. Their cottage appeared in the darkness, small and real and theirs. Sarah had planted the garden that surrounded it. Marcus had built the deck. Together they'd painted every room, hung every picture, chosen every piece of furniture that fit their budget before budget became irrelevant. Inside, their cat, Professor Whiskers, adopted from a shelter despite Eleanor's visible horror, wound around their ankles. The house smelled like the pot roast Sarah had made before they'd left. Like home in a way Eleanor's penthouse never could, Marcus fed the cat while Sarah changed into comfortable clothes. When she came back downstairs, he was standing in the kitchen, looking lost. I'm sorry, he said quietly. For keeping the program secret. For letting my family get away with treating you like that. For all of it. Sarah poured herself water from the tap, no smart system calculating optimal hydration here, and tried to organize her thoughts. I believe that you're helping kids. I believe your intentions are good. But Marcus, you have to see how it looks. How keeping secrets, even good secrets, creates exactly the kind of doubt your family was trying to plant. I know, and you have to deal with your family. Actually deal with them. Not just defend me in the moment and then let it happen again next time. Because I can't keep doing this. I can't keep being the person who's not quite right, not quite enough, not quite what they wanted for you. You're exactly what I want. What I've always wanted, then show me. Sarah set down her glass. Show me the program. Introduce me to these kids. Let me actually be part of your life instead of just the wife who doesn't understand why you need escape hatches. Marcus nodded slowly. Okay. Yes. I'm leaving for Alaska in 3 days. Come with me. The invitation hung between them, part olive branch, part challenge. Sarah had research to prep, grants to write, a life that didn't include unscheduled trips to Alaska. But she also had a husband who apparently had a secret life teaching teenagers, and a marriage that suddenly felt less solid than it had that morning. Okay, she said. I'll come. Marcus looked relieved and worried in equal measure. It's going to be rustic. No smart systems, no climate control, just cabins and fish and kids who've had harder lives than we can imagine. I study sharks for a living, Marcus. I think I can handle rustic, he smiled, and for a moment he looked like the man she'd married, the one who'd worked as a mid-level software engineer and thought $80,000 a year was success. Before the billions, before his family's expectations became impossible, before secret programs and silent treatment, they went to bed without making love, which felt significant. Marcus fell asleep quickly, but Sarah lay awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to reconcile the man beside her with the stranger who'd kept secrets for 3 years. Good secrets, apparently. Noble secrets. But secrets nonetheless. Her phone buzzed with a message from Destiny. Dr. Chen, are you awake? I can't sleep, I'm so excited. This internship is going to change everything, Sarah typed back. You're going to change everything. The internship is just the tool. Never forget that. You sound like Mr. Wei. He says stuff like that. Sarah blinked at the screen. You know Marcus Wei? Yeah. He and Ray run this program for foster kids. Business training and mentoring and stuff. He's kind of intense but in a good way? Like he actually cares. Sarah's chest tightened. Destiny knew Marcus. Had met him through this program Sarah had just learned existed. A program that apparently changed lives while Sarah was busy feeling inadequate at family dinners. He's good people, Sarah typed. Get some sleep. You've got a big future ahead. She set down the phone and turned to look at Marcus, his face relaxed in sleep, vulnerable in a way he never let himself be awake. This man who'd secretly been changing lives while his family implied he was cheating. This man who'd kept something wonderful from her because he didn't trust her to handle it the right way, or maybe didn't trust himself to explain it properly. In 3 days, she'd fly to Alaska. She'd meet these kids, see this program, understand what Marcus had been building in secret. And maybe, if she was lucky, she'd figure out whether the problem was his family's poison or something deeper in their marriage that neither of them wanted to examine. But tonight, she'd just lay awake in their cottage that Eleanor hated, next to the husband she'd thought she knew completely, and wondered when enough had become a question instead of a certainty.